Tamanna had everything. He had 10 acres of wetland and he had peoples, whatever he orders to them, whatever instruction he gives them, they were ready to obey that instructions. When he started to sing in public, even Basavaya also tried to do so, but he couldn't reach the people. Whatever the property Tamanna had, it just tried to grab everything, but Tamanna was least bothered. And later Tamanna was felicitated as the best poet of that time. Hello everyone, I am Babita Tamaya, lecturer, Department of English, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. In my previous revision class, I revised the poem When You Are Old. In my today's revision class, I'll be revising the chapter The Gardener, written by P. Lankesh. Before moving on with the question and answers, let me tell the synopsis in short. The narrator tells the reader that this story originated in his chance encounter with an old man who was standing in a coconut grove near Chennarayapatana. The old man was a laborer, overseer and philosopher all rolled into one. So an old man who walked hundreds of miles and has reached the coconut grove near Chennarayapatana. And he was a laborer, overseer and a philosopher. All these three characters is rolled in one person. And the owner of that plantation was looking for such a man who can take care of his property. The increase in income brought a perceptible change in the lifestyle of the owner. So here, after the arrival of the old man, what happened in the estate? What happened in his coconut grove? There was heavy theft. All that was stopped. His plantation started to increase day by day, and the old man could understand the problem of the workers. So here what happens after his arrival, the owner of the plantation became lethargic, that is, he became lazy. And he was a hardworking person. He was not showing any interest towards his property. But here each and everything was taken care by the old man. Now the owner's wife is worried whether the old man's arrival is for the good or for the worse. The plantation expanded and the owner became lethargic and shied away from his hard work. He became lazy and whatever the hard work he was doing in his estate, in his own estate, he just shied away from his work. He was not at all showing any interest towards his work. One day, when she was in a fix like this, the old man met her and he offered a tender coconut and he sat on the embankment of the well. The owner's wife was worried about her husband because she could find or she could see lots of changes in him and he became very lethargic. So she was in a fix of mind what to do, how to come out this problem. At that time, the old man, he sees the owner's wife in the estate and he just offers her tender coconut and he sits next to her near the embankment of the well over there. She had no alternative. She has to sit next to him. The old man begins his narration. So when he offered her a tender coconut, she did not have any other way. Even she has to sit next to the man. And what did the old man do? He started to narrate the story. What was the story all about? A man called Tamanna had everything. 10 acres of wetland, a comfortable house and people too ready to carry out his orders or instructions. He also had a rival and his name Sangoji. So now the old man is narrating a story about Tamanna and Sangoji. What was Tamanna here? Tamanna had everything. He had 10 acres of wetland and he had peoples, whatever he orders to them, whatever instruction he gives them, they were ready to obey that instructions. Such kind of a person was Tamanna. But here he had a rival. He had an enemy. Who is the enemy here? That is, first in the story, he says it is Sangoji. Then later he says, no, his name is not Sangoji. He assumes to say that his name is Basavaya. Tamanna and Basavaya were rivals. Who were the two rivals here in this chapter? That is Tamanna and Basavaya. See now, first it was only a healthy competition and that competition later turned into rivalry between them. See, if Tamanna bought 4 acres of land, Basavaya do the same. If one had 10 friends, the other acquired 15 admirers. So, if one had bought 4 acres of land, the other, that is Basavaya, also would buy the land. If one had 10 friends, the other would acquire 15. So, it was a competition between two. So, whatever the land was there in that village, everything was occupied by Tamanna and Basavaya. Tamanna had 1,000 acres and Basavaya had 800 acres. So your Tamanna had 1,000 acres of property, but Basavaya had only 800. 200 acres of property was less with Basavaya. So what did he do? He sent few of his people to just ask Tamanna to sell his 200 acres of property. But Tamanna did not agree to sell his property. Instead of that, Tamanna was ready to buy all the 800 acres of Basavaya's property. And when Tamanna had 200 acres more, Basavaya could not tolerate this. So what did he do? He sent his people, but Tamanna was not ready to sell. At last, Basavaya goes along with his supporters and he forcibly acquires his 200 acres of property and put a fence over there. So after putting a fence, did Tamanna go and fight there? So here, the supporters of Tamanna says, you can get your property back. How? You can file a case, or you can take the help of the police, or we as your supporters will help you to get your property. You have 3 options. But Tamanna says, I don't want to fight or file a case, anything like that with Basavaya. So he thought of some other plan. What was the plan here? So Tamanna, with all his experience, whatever experience he had in his life with Basavaya, all those experience, he composed that as a ballads and he started to sing them in public. So he wanted to give him a competition. So what did he do? He thought all his experience and started to write the ballads, and then he started to sing. When he started to sing in public, even Basavaya also tried to do so, but he couldn't reach the people. Basavaya became desperate and encroached more and more Tamanna's land. So when Tamanna is becoming famous, when he is becoming popular day by day, he couldn't tolerate that. So what did Basavaya do? Whatever the property Tamanna had, he tried to grab slowly, but Tamanna ignored, and he was felicitated as the best poet of his times. When he is losing his property, he is just ignored about that, and he was felicitated as the best poet of that times. Basavaya felt humiliated. He got a palatial mansion and appointed few people to praise him. So what did he do? When Tamanna is becoming famous, he couldn't tolerate, he couldn't see that. So Basavaya, he himself built a big mansion and he appointed few people only to praise Basavaya. Not only that, he decorated himself with gold, diamond and precious stones, so that each and every people will come and speak about him, and this news spreads like that. But it never happened so. He himself decorated with gold, diamond and precious stones. He called the visitors to see his house. The visitors who came to Basavaya's place, they said, you have everything at your house, but something is missing. That is, Tamanna's books was missing in his house. He said, because he wanted to become famous like Basavaya, he built a mansion, he decorated himself with gold and diamond jewelries. Even then he couldn't. Whoever visited his house, they said that Tamanna's books is missing. As long as Tamanna was there, Basavaya had a reason to be alive. But once Tamanna left the place, Basavaya passed away. So first it was a competition, then it started towards the rivalry. When Basavaya got to know about the ill health of Tamanna, he was very happy that he can give a tough competition to Tamanna. But what did Tamanna do? He just left the village and moved away. But Basavaya wanted to leave only because for Tamanna to give him a competition. But once Tamanna left the village and when Basavaya was no more. The old man tells the lady that Basavaya died because he had no reasons to leave. After Basavaya's death, Tamanna tells the lady that he had forgotten all his songs and ballads. So until Basavaya was alive, he couldn't leave his songs and ballads. So after the death of Basavaya, Tamanna left all his songs and ballads. He tells her that her husband was flourishing as a rich man and was not amenable to any advice. And why he says this story in the sense, your husband is flourishing day by day and there will be a tough competition and there will be enemies also. So be careful about your husband. Man is so complicated that till the day of his death, he goes on living for some revenge or other, confronting one challenge the other. So man is really very complicated. How much ever you have, you're filthy rich, but even then it will be not sufficient. You'll be not satisfied with that. You want more and more. That is the man's behavior. And here, when your husband is flourishing more and more, there'll be a competition, there'll be a revenge, and there'll be a challenge in the world where he has to face each and everything. As soon as the old man finishes his story, the narrator reappears and tells the reader that he had seen all this in a dream and hence he is unable to elaborate. So after saying the story, at last the narrator, that is the old man, he says to the owner's wife that whatever the story I have told till now about Tamanna and Basavaya, it is me myself, that is Tamanna, who had a very bad experience in my life with Basavaya as a rivalry and a competitor. And he also says that this is in a dream and he is not able to elaborate the story. He has stopped there and he says that I couldn't elaborate I couldn't continue my story hereafter. This is the story of the chapter, The Gardener. From this chapter, we'll move on to the question answers, 1 marks and 4 marks. From this chapter, you can expect 2 1-mark questions and 2 4 marks questions as per the new model question paper which the board has released. Let's move on to the 1-mark questions. When, according to the narrator, does man lose his name? That is after a particular age. So once you're young, until you die, you will be very famous in the world. But that fame will be for a lifelong. After your death also, will the people remember? No. Only for certain years or age they will remember. So the fame will remember after a particular age. Where was the old man standing? So the old man walked hundreds of miles and reached into a coconut grove near Chennaraya Pattana. Where was the old man standing? In a coconut grove near Chennaraya Pattana. How many acres of wetland did Tamanna had? Tamanna had 10 acres of wetland. He had everything. Along with that, he had 10 acres of wetland. Who was Tamanna's rival? So Tamanna's rival is Basavaya. Don't write Sangoji. It is Basavaya. How many acres of land both Tamanna and Basavaya had? This question they might ask Tamanna and Basavaya, or sometimes only Tamanna or only Basavaya. So Tamanna had 1,000 acres. Basavaya had 800 acres. How many more acres Tamanna had? Tamanna had 200 more acres than Basavaya. Tamanna's disease was Basavaya's. So Tamanna's disease was Basavaya's health. What came to an end after the old man's arrival at the garden? So after the old man's arrival, petty theft in the garden came to an end. Why did Tamanna want to visit Lokya's house? Tamanna wanted to visit Lokya's house to see Lokya's young child who was bedridden due to fever. So after the day work is done, Tamanna says to the owner's wife that he wants to go and see the child who is suffering from fever. Moving on to the 4 marks question. Give an account of the strategies used by Tamanna to destroy Basavaya. What are the strategies Tamanna used to destroy Basavaya? Tamanna, who lived in a far off a place, had everything such as 10 acres of wetland and a comfortable house. Basavaya was his rival. In the beginning, all looked like a healthy competition. Tamanna had 1,000 acres of land and Basavaya had 800 acres. Basavaya couldn't tolerate because Tamanna had 200 acres of more property. He was mad with the range and he acquired his 200 acres of property forcibly and he put a fence over there. And all the supporters of Tamanna were ready to support him to get his property. But Tamanna was not ready to fight with Basavaya and get his property back. A war had become virtually inevitable, but Tamanna was in a search of a method that could destroy Basavaya completely. Instead of filing a case or instead of taking the help of the police, what did Tamanna do? Tamanna thought of a method that he could destroy Basavaya completely. He composed ballads that all his experience, whatever experience he had in his life, he composed that as a ballads and he started to sing. He became popular. Basavaya had no answer for this. When he became popular by singing, Basavaya did not have any answer. Even he also tried, but he couldn't sing. But the only thing what he did in a sense, whatever the property Tamanna had, he just tried to grab everything. But Tamanna was least bothered. And later, Tamanna was felicitated as the best poet of that times. Basavaya shrunk in humiliation as his agriculture task and material wealth was not answer to Tamanna. So, forcibly getting into Tamanna's property or with lots of wealth, nothing worked out with Basavaya. What did Basavaya do? Basavaya built a big mansion. He appointed few people to praise him. He decorated himself with gold, diamond and precious stones. The visitors who visited his place, they said, you have everything at your place, but the books of Tamanna is missing. He couldn't tolerate that. He thought of another method of punishing Basavaya as he was suffering from disease. Tamanna's disease was Basavaya's health, as I told. So when Basavaya got to know that Tamanna is suffering from some disease, he will be the happiest one to know about it because he can give a tough fight where Tamanna will be not ready to accept it because he is suffering from ill health. He decided to put an end to competition. Who? Tamanna, because he knew that when he is not well, he couldn't give a competition. So he himself tried to move away from the village. He thought that his death alone would destroy Basavaya. He gave up everything and started off. When he got to know but because he got to know that Basavaya is waiting for his death. What Tamanna did in the sense, he stopped everything and he just moved away from that village. Second question. Trace the course of rivalry between Tamanna and Basavaya that moved away from visible domain to an abstract domain. Basavaya was Tamanna's rival. If Tamanna bought land, Basavaya also followed the suit. They acquired friends and admirers in competition. So, first, as I told, it was a competition and that competition turned towards rivalry. All this looked like healthy competition, but gradually it rose to such a pitch that no land left in the village and everything was bought by Tamanna and Basavaya. Basavaya was mad with range as Tamanna had 1,000 acres of land and Basavaya had 800 acres. He took away Tamanna's 200 acres of land forcibly. Tamanna found a new method to destroy Basavaya completely. He started composing all his experience in the form of ballads and started to sing them. Now, the rivalry between Tamanna and Basavaya started moving away from things that were visible towards invisible abstract domain. Tamanna became well known and earned fame. Basavaya filled his house with material wealth. He invited musicians, as I told, he invited musicians and scholars to his house, but he failed miserably. Still, he found surpassing Tamanna. Tamanna was ill. Tamanna's disease was Basavaya's health. So to become famous, to become fame like Tamanna, even he built a big mansion. He invited the scholars and the musicians. He dressed up himself with gold, diamond and precious stones. But they visited his place. They said that you have everything, but not the book of Tamanna. He couldn't tolerate this. At last, when he gets to know about the ill health of Tamanna, he will be very happy. Next, bring out the changes in the lifestyle of the owner after arrival of the old man. So the old man, he walked thousands of miles and he has reached the coconut grove. He was a laborer, overseer, and a philosopher all rolled into one. And the owner of the coconut grove was searching for such a man who can take care of his property. The old man was a laborer, overseer, and philosopher. He came to the garden after walking hundreds of miles, one mark question, near a coconut grove near Chennaraya Patana. He was really useful for the owner. He was well versed in agriculture and was aware of the problem of the workers. He controlled the petty thefts in the garden. The income increased. There was a perceptible change in the lifestyle of the owner. And the plantation, whatever the plantation the owner had, the plantation was expanded. But the owner became lethargic, that is lazy, and he shied away from his hard work. His health and social prestige has risen higher. He acquired many friends. His life became crowded with colorful events. So once he became lazy, he started to acquire more and more friends in his village as well as the neighboring village. His life became crowded with colorful events. But here, the wife of owner was very worried because the old man's arrival was for the good or for the worse. She was worried about his adultery and verses cultivated lately. The gardener made their farm to grow beyond their imagination. The gardener, in the sense, the old man. The old man made their farm to grow beyond their imagination. But they made their life to gradually get out of their hand. But here the wife was worried because her husband was getting out of her hand, where he was not ready to take care of his property. He became lethargic. He shied away from his hard work. So she was so very worried whether the old man's arrival is for the good or for the worse. In this way, the lifestyle of the owner started changing. What measures did Tamanna adopt to humiliate Basavaya? Basavaya was Tamanna's rival. Tamanna did not agree to sell his 200 acres of land, but he was mad with rage and forcibly acquired Tamanna's land. He could not tolerate the invention and he was in search of a method that could annihilate Basavaya completely. He hit upon the idea of composing all his experience in the form of ballads and started to sing them. The rivalry between Tamanna and Basavaya moved away from visible domain to invisible abstract domain. Basavaya also tried to do the same thing, but he couldn't. In like, Basavaya also tried to sing, but he couldn't. He was not successful in his singing. He performed agriculture's tasks more diligently, who Basavaya started to perform. Tamanna's reputation started spreading all around. His songs started making a mention of Basavaya's cruelty and his meanness. Critics analyzed and translated his songs and scholars of folklore were after him. Basavaya helplessly watched all these developments in Tamanna's life with his anger and encroached more and more Tamanna's land, but he did not notice these activities. When Tamanna is becoming famous day by day, even you can see the scholars and the critics, they started to translate his songs, and he was also felicitated as the best poet at that time. He couldn't see all this. So what did he do? He just tried to grab the property of Tamanna, but Tamanna never showed his interest towards his property. Art had become the reason or cause for his life, and he was felicitated as the best poet of the times. So for whom the art has become the reason for life, that is for Tamanna. Basavaya shrunk in humiliation. His house looks dull and empty because Tamanna's books were not there. As I told, built a mansion, appointed the people to praise him, but the visitors who visited his place, they said, Tamanna's books is missing over there. Tamanna had thought of another method of punishing Basavaya. His thoughts went to find no relation between the songs and his body. He thought his death alone could destroy Basavaya. A few days after Tamanna left, Basavaya passed away and Tamanna became a non-entity. So here, when Basavaya got to know about the ill health of Tamanna, he wanted to give a tough competition. He knew that, Tamanna knew that he'll give him a competition. But before that, what did he do? Tamanna just left the village and moved away from the place. Once he went out of the village, here Basavaya passed away and Tamanna became non-entity. These are the few 4 marks questions. So again, I repeat, from this chapter, you can expect 2 1-mark questions and 2 4 marks as per the new model question paper released by the board. As I told, the number of questions has been increased. So you can expect 2 1-mark and 2 4 marks questions. In my next revision class, I'll be revising the poem Heaven If You're Not on Earth. Until then, have a good day. Thank you.